All right, and we continue with our conversation on this election. So, Kwame, then where do we go from here? We seem to be just in a conundrum over what these numbers say. But so what happens now?
Well, I think we'll just have to wait for the result.
Yeah.
I mean, on the whole, just wait for the result, which will be announced. Then obviously we'll have to filter back all those results to polling stations and look at what the real turnout is. But it's clear people are not going to be satisfied with it, whether they're dispassionate, whether they're partisan or not. I think a lot of miscommunication has gone around one way or the other, and that's the unfortunate bit.
Yeah. So
we have a timeline against which we run because we need to announce the result within 7 days of the election. So in as much as we say that the commission has some time to put their numbers together, every time they try to put their numbers together, they introduce new contradictions. Whether that's by chance or deliberate is not for us to do because we can't read their minds. But the truth is, I think, and it should continue, people need to call public bodies to account for every responsibility that they're given.
Let's talk numbers with you for just a minute. 12 billion has been spent on this repeat exercise. 49.9 billion was spent for the August 8th process. That's what, over 60 billion?
Okay.
Is that value for money over the last 2 or 3 months?
Let's be careful as well. I mean, because 49.9 billion was the entire budget for the commission.
Right.
Part of it, of course, I think about half of it is what was dedicated. Half of it is what was dedicated to all that. First, the Constitution of Kenya asks us to hold elections every 5 years on a second Tuesday and all that. It does not say that should be subject to a budgetary control. So if the courts then found out that we didn't hold an election properly, then we need. Now, the question about whether it's value for money is upon us as citizens to ask. And the only point where it comes now to whether we can question whether it's value for money is that we spent this amount, which on a per voter basis, this is one of the most expensive elections in the world.
That's right.
Not in absolute terms, but on a per voter basis. It's one of the most expensive in the world. And right here today, we are still accusing each other of partisanship based on numbers that have been given by the IEBC. That is the disappointing part. But because we have a democracy and we decided to go about it, and Parliament as well, which has the people's representatives, passed an appropriations bill which the president passed. So on the whole, 12 billion on a country that's spending $2.6 trillion 2.6 trillion Kenya shillings is not too much. I mean, that's not to say that it should be wasted. It's not too much. It's just about 1.5 days of tax collection in Kenya.
Right.
But still, we have to ask, are we spending this money for the right purpose? If it's not going to get us a clear, credible, and fair result, then obviously it has not been cost effective.
Daisy, what do you think?
Well, I think, first of all, I'd like to say this, just to clear things, that I think IBC and the chairman especially needs to understand he doesn't have the luxury of misspeaking. He doesn't have the luxury of having slip of the tongue, because that is very likely to set this country on a wrong course. The amount of money that we spend, we lose a lot of money as a country on corruption, wastage, The thing is that we want an exercise that properly reflects the will of the people, giving leadership the mandate, proper mandate, to lead us. A contest which is a fair contest, whereby all parties feel, whether they win or lose, they've won or lost in a fair contest. Now, this is a problem because we don't seem to be seeing this, And this is not just in this election. We have problems with our elections. And this really goes to the heart of the matter, which is the integrity question, the question of integrity.
So are our elections a problem, or are they the symptom of a problem?
The elections are not a problem. The way we handle them are a problem. And it's a sign of a deeper problem, which is the corruption, that people are willing to be compromised, to compromise a process that is supposed to reflect the will of the people, so that at the end of the day, it reflects the will of the politician and not the will of the people, or at least that's what people feel. Because we keep feeling every time we have elections, there's a sense of we're being scammed, you know, and that is really unacceptable. We cannot continually change our electoral management body just because we're unhappy with the way they're doing things. I mean, this is a new, you know, these are new commissioners. Okay, the Secretariat is, you know, at least been there for about 5 years. But that we still can't get clarity in our processes. That, for me, speaks to a bigger problem. Because moving forward, remember that the leaders who come out of this process, if these leaders come out of a compromised process, these are the leaders that we are entrusting to make decisions for us, to develop our budgets. So what kind of people are we putting into these positions? What kind of institutions are we nurturing? What are we saying about our country? Because moving forward, please remember that there are several issues that we need to deal with. We've been so fixated by the political question, yet going into the elections, there were several problems that we were facing as a country. Now, this election has actually served to polarize this country further. And moving forward, for Kenya to be successful, we need everybody to feel that they're part of this nation. You know, we can't go on as a divided nation. So this the electoral process is an important process. And IEBC owes us a credible, free, fair, credible, verifiable, transparent process. And we're not getting that.
Charles, do you feel the same way? Do we have a problem with our processes? If so, where is the problem? Is it with the people that are running the processes and systems, or is it with the law?
I think the first problem we have is with the people. Whether it is the people running the institutions, whether it is the people interacting with those institutions. I think Kwame is very right that the amount of money we've spent on these elections, at least that we've given to IEBC as a budget, the total budget for the year, the additional 12 billion, about 60 billion, is a lot of money. If we must spend it to get good elections, yes, let's go ahead and do it. But I have the feeling that even if we threw at IEBC twice the money we did, we may not get a better quality election. And don't forget that it's not only IEBC that is spending money. Government is spending money on security services. The wananchi, the politicians are spending money in campaign. The economy is suffering. All this is the cost of our election. So the cost of our election is on the north of 100 billion shillings. And yet we can't agree. And
why can't we agree? Why do you think that is then?
I think we have an extreme deep suspicion of one another. Daisy has said something about how we seem ready to manipulate processes. One of the phenomena that I have spoken about before is called psychological projection. And simply stated is, if I'm a thief, I think everyone else wants to steal from me. If I'm a cheat, I think everyone else is lying to me. So you find that because we don't trust one another, we don't trust ourselves, we don't trust one another. And so we put in a lot of energy to secure processes from any kind of manipulation. And yet, there's someone who said that the genius of an engineer can never overcome the ingenuity of a fool or of a cheat. So what
Charles,
happens is...
Are we not giving IEBC the benefit of the doubt?
I feel...
To allow them to carry on? Is that
I feel because of the polarized environment. You remember in the run-up to the 8th August elections, there was no divided rhetoric against IEBC. The rhetoric that we've seen started immediately the elections ended. Before that, there had been rhetoric against the previous commissioners. But when the current commissioners came into place, we gave them a very good environment to carry out the election. The outcome was unsatisfactory to several Kenyans. And the moment that happened, the environment changed. It became, in my view, almost impossible for them to deliver an election that would be satisfactory to all Kenyans without
Charles,
a prior political agreement.
Charles, did that not come from inside the commission as well? I mean, Dr. Rosalind Akombe, when she resigned, talked about divisions. Wafula Chebukati, just days to this repeat poll, said there are divisions within the commission, also between the commissioners and the secretariat. So isn't this messaging also coming from the IEBC itself rather than from outside?
I've been thinking, Yvonne, and reflecting on this issue. And I personally think that the division among institutions involved with the election began with the Supreme Court between 30th and 31st of August, after they had heard all the parties. And this manifested in their divided opinions. That division has percolated to other institutions. So, of course, yes, we can blame IBC. They are divided. The Supreme Court was equally divided. The political players are divided. The media is divided. You notice that the country is divided. Somehow we assume that IBC can remain in this island or tower where they are not infected by the divisions affecting the rest of the country, the other institutions in the country. And the reality is that they cannot, because they are part of us.
All right, let's talk about, the effect on the economy for a moment, Kwame. And, we keep saying the politicking and that sort of thing is hurting the economy and the numbers. And there almost is a sense that, let's finish this process, mop it up nicely, tidily, let's get a winner, and then, we can move forth. The nexus for you between our politics, our policy, and the economy, particularly at this time?
No, this is a more comfortable discussion for me. Thanks for taking it here. Between the politics and the economy, let's start with the fact that every elections year since 1963, since our independence, we've usually seen a dip in GDP growth.
Yeah.
And it takes usually between 18 months to 2 years for the recovery to reach the top again and then to go back. So it's obviously telling you something about the fact that we need to reflect more clearly about why our politics tends to be volatile, but we're not the only people with volatile politics. Why then it reflects in that kind of shock on the economy? And it's clear, institutions are not doing their job. So I am not prepared to accept that this should be business as usual. That's a first. The second point is, if you look at Kenya's economy, in the year in which we have an election together with a drought, that's a particularly potent one, including 2007. So while many people talk about the elections itself, the very idea that people were already facing stress at the household level could have also added some spark to that fire that we saw. And yet this year shares some of those same values. Last year, of course, towards the third quarter of the year, already the economy was soft.
Yeah.
So the point is, yes, I think the political moment has affected the elections. But it's not true that every dip we've seen in the economy has actually affected, has been entirely on account of the elections.
Okay.
And it's important for us to separate those facts from. And I know there are all manner of figures we had from one of our national business bodies saying that we've lost as much as 700 billion.
Yeah.
I asked to look at the way they've calculated that, and to be honest, it's a bit embarrassing, because basically what they did was a census of asking people how much did you lose in terms of business and putting together. But that's definitely not the correct way to tell us what the loss is. In the sense that if business has been destroyed and property has been destroyed, that is definitely a loss. But if I did not make sales today because shops were not open, right? And then Daisy's household buys the same goods from another shop, you cannot call that a loss. So the way we are bunching up numbers also tells you that there's pressure even on the business community to try and press politicians to the view that the economy is hurting so that we can solve the problem. The problem is we are adding our opinions and lies to this quantum, and it's actually making public debate around the economy as well, based on inaccurate numbers.
Yeah,
those numbers are
and
inaccurate.
It's becoming a political conversation about the economy and how we are faring. Let me ask you a direct question. Yeah. Demos are going on in town, businesses have to close, people are saying, look, like you said, I'm not making any sales. And so you hear from the business community that we need to tone down on the demos, that it's hurting the economy. Yeah. How does that make you feel? Because there's the whole question now about the economy versus those who are seeking their voice towards better governance. There's that trade-off there.
It comes from two things, and I think that's where we make, in our view, we make an error, and this is something that we've studied at the Institute of Economic Affairs. We think we would actually state this a little differently. First, business people in Kenya speak, let me talk about the Nairobi crowd of business people, speak as if the economy is some box where government stars it a bit, you chuck politics out, and then we see growth. The truth is, if you are a student of economics and you look at the way they describe the economy, you'd be embarrassed. The economy is every single thing that Kenyans do when they wake up in the morning to go and till their farms. All those work together.
Right.
So let's not give the impression that a business person sitting in a suit, in an Armani suit in Nairobi saying I'm hurting, should be should supersede the interest of somebody else who's out there. Secondly, we cannot divorce our politics from our economy. But the worst part that I think our business lobbies made, which was serious, was they crafted, in my view, their political prejudices in an economics message. So they're using the economy is hurting to support the side that they want to support, which they're entitled to, but it is not entirely truthful. So if you want to support one administration, go ahead and support it. You're allowed. But don't lie by bringing fictitious numbers to the debate and saying that because of that, our politics is hurting, as if there's one side that is politics and then this. It's not such a neat divide.
Okay, all right. Daisy, I want to ask you about constitution reforms, because now we're hearing of a multi-sectoral forum that has members of civil society, trade unions, businessmen as well, now having the discussion, sort of like an Ufungamano initiative, that we want to start to think of reforms. Should we be thinking of reforms? Is it that time yet? Has this election exposed some gaps in our constitution?
First of all, I want to say thank you, Kwame, for that. I mean, really, that needed to be said, what, Kwame's statement. Are we looking at a constitutional moment? Absolutely, yes. We need to have dialogue. Now, dialogue hasn't only just come up. The discussion around dialogue didn't just come up with the crisis, with the political crisis we're facing right now. If you recall, as early as 2014, there were calls for dialogue, so that we could have more cohesion. We are a very divided country right now. We are very divided. There's a sense of exclusion. There's a sense of frustration.
And is this the right time to have a conversation about changing the constitution?
Yes, it is. Not even so. We need to actually now begin to discuss those issues that have so many people disaffected. Okay? We need to discuss those issues. We need to discuss the exclusion, because we are talking about the constitution. Look, as women, we're still fighting for the 2/3 gender principle, which is part of the inclusivity principle. We haven't gotten the disabled on board. We're still lying to the youth. We have huge unemployment problems. We have a health crisis. We have a food crisis. We have so many crises and so many pressures around the people. For this country to move forward, we need to move forward as a united force, because we need all hands on deck so that this economy recovers, so that we can get that economic recovery. You can't have that when you have a very polarized nation. So it's important that we begin to talk, and we need to begin to look at how then do we address those issues. But the question is, you see, the way the dialogue is being structured, it's being structured along the political.
Right.
It's really being looked at more about appeasing the political class so that the political class settle down and
the
move
political
on with
temperatures
business as usual.
Yeah.
We're not looking at how do we address the challenges that the ordinary Mwananchi is facing. And that is a discussion that we must have. So I think it is a good start that the multi-sectoral forum is there. I think it's very necessary, and I'm glad, at least I saw the Speaker of the National Assembly, I think when he was casting his vote, he talked about dialogue. He said he was willing to broker dialogue, of course, at the political level. But for me, the thing is, this thing is really not about the politicians. The politics is manifesting a deeper seated problem that is among the body politic, that is Kenya, you know, and we must address that issue, because that is the real ticking time bomb. That sense of exclusion. You look at people who are ready to run headlong into battle, you know, because they've got nothing to lose, you know. We can't have that kind of, you know, lives being so expendable. A government that is so quick to snuff out life in the name of politics, you know. The little value for life. And I think that we need to start taking this discussion back to what it is that we want to be as a nation called Kenya, you know, in terms of a nation state. So that dialogue must happen. If it needs to be framed within the Constitution, then
that's where it should happen.
But we need honesty from our political class. And the big question is, will we get honesty from the political class to be able to have this discussion?
Charles, should we be talking about the Constitution? Should we be reforming? Should we be dialoguing? And what about?
We should be talking about the Constitution, definitely. I agree. I've always been a champion for constitutional amendment from the days when we enacted the Constitution. And that's a positive point. I agree with Daisy that the solution is not just to amend the Constitution or to appease the political class. if you only have a nail, every problem looks like a hammer. And, if you only have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. And what is happening is that in our country, we tend to assume that the legal solution is a solution to economic problems, which it is not. You need an economic solution. Is a solution to social problems, which is not. You need a social solution. So I think we need a multifaceted solution. The solution to the sense of exclusion may involve some change of the structure of government, but it also requires economic solutions or remedies. And I think ultimately we also need to recognize that whatever we do, every election all over the world involves an element of division. Be it the Brexit vote in the UK, be it the election of Donald Trump in America, be it the purported referendum of Catalonia, they all involve division. What we seem to have been unable to do is to surmount that temporary or transient division that is demanded by democracy every 5 years elections and come together the moment the process ends. So our divisions deepen. We end up worse off after the elections. And that's why you find some of the old men and women in the villages saying, why should I vote again? If the last time I voted, I lost my property, I don't know, somebody was killed, somebody was injured, and so on. So I think we really need to reflect. And finally, Yvonne, I think we need to hold politicians to account. We have become so subdued, subservient, and meek. We are not able to call upon the politicians. The voices of civil society, of the religious community are becoming muted as the political voices are growing louder and louder. And I think the solution begins when these other voices start rising and we start subsiding the political voices.
30 seconds. Talking. What are we talking about? I just want to give you the final word.
I don't know, to be honest, that because it's very easy to say people should talk.
Yeah.
But what's the theme? What are we discussing? Because we can't speak about an election that's been done and with the result having been delivered. The other thing I think is that we have to be careful asking for constitutional amendment because it doesn't look like the constitution is our problem. We seem to just be unable to sit without, to accept rules, irrespective of what their outcome would be. But as we hold politicians accountable, let's also hold those people who work in the public sector accountable for every action. But as I conclude, I think that this election is just basically a test to the togetherness we'll need when we have to deal with our debt and economic crisis that's certain to come. And at that point, we'll need all hands on deck. So anybody who has the view that we can dispense with a few people because we have quote-unquote renewed our mandate will be surprised. And it will not be a pleasant one. Thanks.
Thank you. Kwame Owino from the Institute for Economic Affairs, Daisy Amdani and Charles Kanjama for an interesting conversation about where we go from here. We're taking a break. I'll be back. We have the